Good morning, Clem2 and everyone. Hope you're having a good day. We're having a good day here. Sunshine all day. The rain went away at least for a day, so that's a nice break, although the rain is an important part of life, and so it's not bad when it's not too much of it, but we're glad for the break and glad to have a sunny day. Hope you are too. So we've been talking about the Sabbath. And if anybody ever says to you, you have to keep the Sabbath, you should say, oh, come on, give me a break. Well, that was a pun. The Sabbath is a break. That's the whole idea of it. Take a break from your normal routine. Rest up. And we're going to, in the coming days, probably Friday, look at what does the Sabbath mean for us today as followers of Jesus after Jesus came. How do we relate to the Sabbath? But today I wanted to think about what Jesus had to say about the Sabbath. And there's a story, excuse me, it was important enough that Jesus recorded it in, or three different gospel writers all recorded the same story. I'm going to have us look at the one out of Mark. But at the end of the story, Jesus gives us two really important principles that we need to understand. So let's take a look at this. Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 27. It says that on one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and his disciples walked along, and they began to pick up heads of grain. It was something that was permissible. It wasn't seen as stealing. A farmer was expected to allow a certain amount of his crop to go to people in need. They weren't there to harvest vast amounts of his crop, but they could go there. They were hungry and pick some grain or some other stuff that he'd grown for a meal as needed. And that's what these guys were doing. So the problem in the Pharisees' eyes did not have to do with the fact that they were walking in somebody else's farm field and picking grain. What the Pharisees were worried about is their own nitpicking rules about what did it mean to live out the Sabbath. So some of the Pharisees said to him, look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath? Now, what would be unlawful about it? Well, in their very exacting rules that they had taken a very simple principle to observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, and they created a gazillion rules around it. And one of them was you could not harvest. That would be considered work. And they considered what they were doing harvesting. They were not really harvesting. They were picking a few grains to eat almost as a snack or maybe as a light meal. But it was not harvesting of the crops. But in the Pharisees' eyes, it was. Now, the Old Testament scriptures take the Sabbath very seriously, even to the point of some people, they were encouraged to put them to death for abusing the Sabbath. That wasn't just anybody, but it was meant to be taken seriously, but these guys took it way too far in how they understood it. So Jesus answered and said, have you never read that David, when he and his companions were hungry and in need, in the days of Abiathar, the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. And Jesus was implying there was nothing wrong with what David did there because the unusual circumstances and the need for the food that they had, that was okay. And nobody, not even the Pharisees, condemned David for what he did. In fact, David is one of the major heroes of the Jewish faith, in particular for a Pharisee. So they never criticized David. So there's a bit of hypocrisy going on here, that they would criticize David and not, or they would criticize Jesus' followers and not David. So this is the thing that Jesus then said that's really important. We're going to talk about it. Then he said, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. I'm going to read that again. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. And so the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Did you catch those two principles? Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. and the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. Now, let's take the first one. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. It's really important to understand in any of the commandments that God has given that they are there for our good, not to rob us of joy. When he says, don't do this, it's for a good reason. When he says to go do that, it's for a good reason. All of the laws and commandments that you find in the Bible, whether they were the ones given to the people of Israel, whether they were the ones given to the followers of Jesus, wherever you find a command, it's always based on two things. One, the character of God. Who is God? And so there's certain expectations that human beings will behave a certain way as a result of who God is. Secondly, what God did was also based on the character of humanity. And even though we are thousands and thousands of years away from these guys and from a bygone era, what would appear at times to be a very different culture than ours, and in some ways it was, the truth is the heart of human beings hasn't changed. We are as prone to sinfulness now as we were then. And not only are we just as prone to do it, we're just as prone to do the same things as they did then. We have a problem with sex now. We had a problem with sex then. We had a problem with stealing now. We had a problem with stealing then. We have a problem with dishonesty now. We had a problem with dishonesty then. We can keep going on and on. The heart of human being has not changed. And so God gave commands, but they were always for our good, and they should be interpreted that way, and they should be received that way, that these things were given for our good. So Jesus says the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. We don't serve the Sabbath. The Sabbath is there for our benefit to serve us. And in serving it, having it serve us properly, as we looked at on Monday, we honor God as a result. Here's the second thing, and this is going to be important for Friday's lesson. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. Two parts to that. Jesus is claiming to be Lord. If anybody ever tells you that scriptures never teach that Jesus was God, this is one of those places. Jesus is claiming it for himself. So all of us have a decision to make. We either believe that or we don't believe that. One of the options is not to say the scriptures or Jesus never claimed that Jesus was God. Here it is. The Son of Man is Lord. But as Lord, it means he gets to both set the rules. We don't get to set the rules. He gets to set the rules, and he gets to interpret the rules and what they mean and how they are to be applied in our lives. And so in this case, he's saying these guys were not breaking the Sabbath rule because they were not harvesting grain. They were just having a light meal, which was permissible, which was allowed in the Old Testament to have a meal. And so there was nothing wrong with what they did. He corrected their misunderstanding of both the Sabbath and who Jesus was all at the same time. Friday, we're going to look at then, as a result, when Jesus said he is the Lord of the Sabbath, he is the one that made the rule, he is the one that interprets the rule, he is the one that can change how the rule is applied to us. We're going to look Friday at what does that mean for us today. But that's enough for today. 9 minutes long. I hope you have a good couple days, and I look forward to seeing you on Friday.